I'm just going to start with the question that everyone is asking. Why is the internet going crazy over the fact that Riley Strain had no water in his lungs and yet they're claiming it was a drowning? And then at the same time, after Kiely's autopsy and there was no water in her lungs, people just went, oh well, case closed. What's the difference? Riley's parents went and got another autopsy. They weren't happy with the results. Were they not pressured by a town that goes by the Truckee Way, where they have to foresee any problems and fix them ahead of time? Perhaps Riley's parents are aware of a bigger picture, which is what makes it easier for them to question the system, unlike Kylie's parents, who are simply looking at the case, the one single case, their own daughter ending up in water. What do I mean by that? Does this name ring a bell? Jelani Day. His mum is still fighting Francis also. Why does the name ring a bell? Because in 2021, Jelani Day went missing from a bar. His body was found, I think it was a few weeks later, in a nearby river. And the interesting thing, his shoes and trousers were found carefully laid out, discarded on the bank of the river. More interestingly enough, Jelani was a competitive swimmer, and he had no water in his lungs. Jelani and Riley are two of hundreds. I heard someone say the other day that there's been somewhere upwards of 400 cases of young college-aged men who have gone missing from bars and wound up drowned in rivers. The thing is, it seems to be largely accepted that these guys have all drowned. 400 plus of them. But then you get parents who question it. Riley's mother, Jelani's mother. Why? Because there's no actual signs of drowning. So how many of these cases that have been ruled accidental drownings, where young men have gone missing from bars and wound up in rivers, actually weren't accidental drownings? So if you listen to Dra Latina, she says that drowning is a determination that comes from exclusion. In other words, if there are no other signs of trauma or injury, then they rule it a drowning. The problem is there are multiple markers which would indicate a drowning. What happens when those markers aren't present and yet a drowning is still ruled as a cause of death? So, of course, those of us who are adamant about fighting for justice for Kiely are closely watching all the attention that is happening around the Riley Strain case. Thankfully, there are creators like Harsh who are talking about the Riley Strain case and comparing it with Kiely's case. The absence of water in the lungs. Of course, as with every case, there are people coming out and speaking with their expertise about the Riley Strain case. So once again, we have the whole theory of dry drowning being put forward, where basically he's gone in the water and had a bronchial spasm and drowned as a result of that, and hence no water in the lungs. But Let's talk about that. Because I've no doubt that those people who are trying to push the narrative that Kiely's death was an accident think, okay, we've indicated that's what happened. Thing is, when someone goes in the water and has a bronchial spasm because of the coldness of the water, they are first going to gulp water. There will be some water present in the lungs. The lungs won't fill with water, but there will be some water present. There will also be water present in the stomach. So it'll be interesting to see with Riley's autopsy if there was any water present in the stomach. Now, the other thing that happens if someone has that bronchial spasm and their airway shuts up and there's no air going down into their lungs, what does happen is that they have water going up their nose and into all those areas in the head that are interconnected. So, if you had drowned, is there water in the nasal passages? Is there water in the earways, ear canals? Because if there's no water in the nasal passages and ear canals, he didn't drown. Interestingly enough, there wasn't any mention in Kiely's autopsy. And if you listen to Dra Latina, she says if it's not mentioned in the autopsy, it didn't happen, it didn't exist. So we know that with Kiely, there was no significant amounts of water recorded in the lungs. There was no water in the stomach. There was no water recorded in the ear canal or in the nasal passage. There was nothing whatsoever that could have pointed to a drowning. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and the interesting thing that he said was that from his knowledge, that law enforcement aren't given training when it comes to investigating deaths in water. So in terms of autopsies and stuff, they don't do enough. And it certainly seems that they didn't do enough with Kiely's autopsy. They didn't test for GHB. Did they do any tissue biopsies? It doesn't appear so. They noted an area of discoloration on the tissue on her head. Did they do a biopsy of it? No. They just noted it and put it aside, saying it was probably to do with lividity. But of course, if Kiely didn't die in the water and didn't drown, could be due to lividity, or it could be hiding a head trauma that they missed. So, in terms of Riley Strain, this same supposed expert that I saw various little snippets of here and there, who said that the drowning was probably a dry drowning and that there was a bronchial spasm, also tried to say that perhaps his trousers came off in the water, as did his boots. Right, sure. She said maybe they got hooked on something and came off. Here's the thing. I'm not going to go into the grossness of bloating and stuff like that. But he was wearing cowboy boots and denim trousers. How easily are they going to come off in the water? Not easily at all. Doesn't happen. They were removed before he got in the water. Why were they removed? Did he remove them himself or did someone else remove them? It's a mystery. If they came off accidentally, how come pair of tight denim jeans came off, and yet his boxes remained untouched. That doesn't make sense. I hope that the autopsies for Riley Strain become made available, because I think it's going to be really interesting to compare them with Kiely's autopsy. So the parents are saying there was no water in the lungs. Was there water in the stomach? Were there other signs of trauma that haven't been mentioned? There's so much that could be in that autopsy, but the media's been given very little. Either that or the media's been given more, but they've not really understood what they were looking at, and they've simply jumped on the no water in the lungs without looking at other factors such as weight of the lungs, whether there's water in the stomach, whether there's signs of the various microbes and stuff from the water in his stomach. Because that's the thing. When someone ends up in the water, you have all the little microbes and stuff from the water, which should be present in the stomach. We didn't get that with Kiely either. What about in the area of Riley's mouth? Are there any signs there that would point towards a drowning? Was there foam? You know, to me, I find Kiely's autopsy to be super, super important and super crucial. But at the same time, I hate looking at it and I hate analysing it. I hate going back to it. It makes me sad. And there's so many things that are wrong with it. So I've never really done a deeper analysis of it. But I really hope that when it comes to Riley Strain, in comparison with Kiely Rodni, that there are content creators out there that will sit down with the different autopsies from Riley Strain when they become available and do a comparison between his autopsies and that of Kiely Rodni, because I think that would be quite telling. And what would it mean for Kylie's case if, following this second autopsy for Riley, there's things that happen and police decide to reopen Riley's case and deem it as a homicide? What if it's decided that actually, yeah, there was no water in the lungs, there were no other signs of drowning? We need to take another look at this case and find out what truly happened. Sadly, in Kylie's case, all they can do is review what information was given with regards to the autopsy and the investigation around Kylie's death. There will be autopsy photos and stuff, but of course Kiely was cremated, so there can't be any more investigations in relation to what was missed in the autopsy. So all those things that didn't happen can never happen. But GHB, they still have tissue samples, hopefully. Although if Ryan's lawsuit has now been dropped, then does that mean that the tissue samples that were kept in Kylie's case have now been disposed of? Is it too late for further tests to see if there was GHB or other untested drugs in her system? Synthetic fentanyl, for example. Ketamine is another example. I think as far as the tox screen, I'll be very interested to see what results come back in terms of Riley strain and to see if they did test for all those other things like GHB, ketamine, fentanyl, etc. I think it's probably time that law enforcement were given better training around cases involving apparent drownings. Because if we've got Kiely and we've got Riley, both of whom have been deemed accidental drownings with no water in the lungs, and we know for a fact that there were no other signs of drowning in Kiely's case, and you've got these 400 or more cases of drownings throughout the United States of college-aged young men who simply went missing from a bar and were found later on in a river. What's going on? Law enforcement need to really stop, question what they're doing, have a look at their protocols, and fix this problem. How many times are people being classified as accidental drownings when that's not the case? So I think it's important that we keep an eye on what's happening with the Riley strain case. I'd like to say that I will do more coverage of it, but you know what I'm like. As much as I try to cover other cases, and I do cover some other cases at times, when I get pulled in enough to do so, they don't draw me in as much as Kylie's case does. So I'll probably be quietly observing on the periphery and maybe reporting back if there are things in Riley's case that I think are going to have significance in Kylie's case. But as far as full coverage, I think there's plenty of people that are jumping on board there as it is. I noticed that Nancy Grace has started at Riley's case, which means that there'll probably be even more people who suddenly start paying attention. So I think that our role, those of us who cover Kylie's case, I think our role is to try and draw people's attention to Kylie's situation as people become riled up over Riley strain, and that wasn't meant as a pun, but as people become engaged with the Riley strain case, I think it's up to us to continue to get Kylie's name out there, to continue to remind people that Kiely didn't drown. Kiely had no water in her lungs, nor did she have any other signs that could be construed in any way as indications of drowning. I really hope that there is a positive resolution in Riley's case, and I hope also that perhaps through that we can gain more attention for Kylie's case, and that just maybe there can also be justice for Kiely.